Namaste, good evening, and welcome to Chaitya Media and the Festival of Bharat. I'm Sharan Sethi, your host. Today, we are joined by a very special guest, Mr. Tenzin Tsundue. He's a poet, a writer, a Tibetan refugee, and an activist, and he has an amazing story to tell. And he's stood up for the cause of free Tibet ever since his childhood. And he's been writing about it, he's been speaking about it, and he's trying his best to contribute his part to this particular movement. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. It's a real pleasure to have you here. Namaste, and how are you, first of all?
Good. Thank you, Tashi Dilek. Namaste. Yeah, I'm speaking from Dharamshala. I've just returned from a big speaking tour in the Himalayas, and I'm happy to join you on this discussion today.
Right. First of all, for our viewers who may not be aware, can you tell us about how your journey actually began and what it is to be a Tibetan in India, for that matter?
Well, yeah, I'm actually born in India, and so therefore I'm as Indian as anybody can be here
Right.
in this country. But my twist in the story is that my parents came from Tibet, and that was the time when His Holiness the Dalai Lama and number of other Tibetan refugees escaped Tibet and had to come to India because China invaded and occupied Tibet. And since 1959 onwards, almost about 100,000 Tibetans they have been living here in India. And also, we have set up Tibetan government in exile here in Dharamshala in Himachal Pradesh state. So this is how we have been running our exile government and also our freedom struggle based in Dharamshala. But now there are Tibetan community all around the world, especially in Europe, in America, and Australia, and different other countries. So almost about 150,000 Tibetans, 150,000 Tibetans live outside Tibet, and we are running our freedom movement as refugees or also as citizens of different other countries. But essentially, we are all Tibetans, and we
Right.
work for the independence of Tibet.
Right. And how do you see the treatment of Tibet, especially with the rise of Xi Jinping and the CCP, right? Now, obviously, there has been different kinds of treatment that has been meted out to the Tibetan communities. And I think it's become really worse in recent times. Would you agree?
So Xi Jinping's dictatorial regime that he has started to reign in from 2012-13 onwards, and now he has made himself the president forever in what is called the People's Republic of China. This meteoric rise of Xi Jinping and also his personal ambition to be more powerful than Mao Zedong's position in the 1950s, 60s, or right up to 70s. I think this is his personal ambition, and also hoping that the Communist Party of China, which is the largest political party in the world that he's running, there are great personal ambitions and the legacies that he wants to leave behind. So therefore, the kind of dictatorial regime he's running in Tibet, not just in Tibet, but China's other occupied countries like East Turkestan,
Right.
Southern Mongolia, Manchuria, and the curbing of any sense of freedom within China. The Chinese people themselves are suffering under Xi Jinping's
Right.
rule, and now Xi Jinping is exporting that kind of curbing personal freedom and freedoms over media, religion, culture. That kind of homogenization that Xi Jinping has been trying to maintain within China is what he is exporting to other countries today, like in Nepal or many countries in Africa and South America. So you see, uh, China is a problem not just for Chinese people, but also China's occupied countries and also China's neighbors.
Right. And in a sense, there has been very nuanced propaganda, right, that has been disseminated by a lot of these Chinese state-owned media houses as well. And one of the propaganda is that, Tibetans today are very happy and they've moved on from what happened, and they don't no longer remember the annexation. I mean, they don't use the word annexation, but integration or whatever. And they say that, we have built so many bridges and railroads and whatnot. We've increased the connectivity. And I think the Tibetans who are living today have completely embraced us. But this is far from reality.
Yes, so when the Chinese invading army, the PLA soldiers, when they first invaded Tibet, they came with that very mission, saying and telling local Tibetans and convincing them they had come to Tibet to build roads, bridges, and things they were not there in Tibet. Of course, we are talking about Tibet in 1949. And 1949, half of the world's independent countries today that we see, about 205 independent countries, half of them were not independent, and they were in real difficult situation, underdeveloped, and Tibet was one such country. Uh, so China came with those kind of promises, and later, once the roads and bridges were built, China used that very infrastructure to bring in the invading army and completely consolidated their control and occupation of Tibet. And that's why His Holiness the Dalai Lama and about 80,000 Tibetans had to escape Tibet and to seek asylum, and which included my own parents, who were at that time young, hardly even teenagers. So that's our story. And in the subsequent years of Chinese invasion, occupation, up until today, more than 1 million Tibetans have died under the Chinese rule, either in a form of public execution, or by repression, jailing, torture, or even in famine and starvation in 1950s and 60s. Starvation was rampant all across China. Millions and millions of Chinese died because of
Right.
starvation, and these were mainly because of the um, unassuming, wrong policies enforced on people by Mao Zedong. And even today, Mao Zedong's all wrongdoings are wrapped under the carpet, and people. People in China today, even today, they celebrate Mao Zedong. So that's one country where there is absolute propaganda, and people live in fear. They are unable to point out where things went wrong. And unless that
Right.
correction happens within China, there will be no change in China.
This is also true in the case of several other communities. For example, the Uyghurs and the Falun Gong activists, right? So it somehow seems like the Han Chinese population is very hell bent on, predominantly putting forth their race and their community ahead of everybody else in China.
Well, as I said, China's, dictatorial regime is not just on the Chinese people, but also on China's occupied countries like Tibet, East Turkestan. East Turkestan is the country where the Uyghur people live. And then there is southern Mongolia, which is the other half of outer Mongolia, which is now free and independent country. And the other half is inner
Right.
Mongolia, which is under Chinese occupation. And then Manchuria, a country which used to rule over China for almost about 250 years, right up to 1911. Manchuria used to rule over China. Today, that very Manchuria is under Chinese occupation. So you
Right.
see, this kind of death, this kind of public execution, this kind of starvation deaths, it happened all across in China's occupied countries and within
Right.
China. And so therefore you see, it is not just colonialism, but the constant repression, so that the only political party, the communist Chinese Communist Party, it is their aim to continue to rule. And today their ambition is not just to rule China, but to topple United States and rule the world.
You made a personal attempt to travel to Tibet several times, if I'm not mistaken, and you were sent back by the authorities there. I mean, that's even as a concept, as an idea, that is such a scary thing to do. And, could you tell us the thought process behind it and what exactly you went through?
So there had been several ways of working for the independence of Tibet at my personal level, and what I tried to do. One of the things was to go to Tibet and work from there, um, along with other Tibetan freedom fighters inside Tibet. And one of the first things that I did after my graduation, I did my BA from Madras, from Loyola College. And after that, I wanted to go to Tibet and join the freedom struggle there. So I went to Ladakh and secretly crossed Ladakh's Tibet border and went inside. And my aim was to really join the freedom movement there and take part in activities. But my planning was poor, and I was ill-equipped mm, to set up any kind of a solid ground link with people inside Tibet. So after 5 days of traveling inside Tibet, I got arrested. I was blindfolded. I was beaten, tortured, interrogated for hours and hours and hours. So, and then they threw me in jail in Ngari region of Western Tibet. And when they were not satisfied with the answers, they took me to Lhasa. So I was in Lhasa jail for 3 months, and later, when they couldn't prove any of the charges they were making, then they had to send me back to India. So that was my first attempt, going to Tibet and taking part in the freedom movement inside Tibet. And when that didn't work, then I thought that then I have to settle for a second option, which is to work for Tibet from outside, which is India. And because I'm born here, I understand India. I'm one of the Indians working here. So I started to work for that. And so, of course, then we came out with different other ways of countering Chinese occupation of Tibet. One of the things is to as refugees, we were saying in 2008 that we are refugees, we want to go back to our own country no matter what happens to us. And we had a huge number of people who were committed to non-violent resistance. In 2008, we had almost about 400 Tibetans literally leading a march from Dharamshala through Delhi, going all the way from Uttarakhand, attempting to cross the Tibet border and going into Tibet. And we were all committed that no matter what happens, we are all committed to non-violent resistance, and we will be willing to go to jail or whatever happens to us, we were willing. But then government of India did not feel at that time that this was a good idea. So they detained us from Dharchula, the border district of Pithoragarh. They arrested us and sent us back into mainland India, and so that's how our second attempt did not work. And subsequently, we did many things. So main idea is to say, like, we are born in India, but we all Tibetans, and it is our right over Tibet, and China is only a colonial or ruler in Tibet, and they must go back to their own country. So
Right.
this has been our main idea behind this.
Tenzin, sorry to put it this way, but even we come from a land of Gandhi, and we've believed in ahimsa for a very long time. But it looks like Tibet and India are on the receiving end because of our non-violent ways. And we've obviously been through a lot of history together. And do you think this is enough to achieve what we want to achieve?
I think we must never have a second opinion about nonviolence. I believe that nonviolence is not a method, and nonviolence is not a tool. Nonviolence is a basic philosophy. Nonviolence is our existence. Because of nonviolence, it makes us who we are as Tibetans or as Indians. In fact, the Tibetans received the lessons of nonviolence from India. Otherwise, Tibetans had always been the warrior who used to rule over central India, cut it. Tibetans had always
Sure.
been the warriors who ruled over Central Asia, and they created one of the biggest military empires in the world in this time between 7th to 10th century. So you
Right.
see, at the time, parts of Mongolia, parts of China, and much of the Himalayas, and all right up to Afghanistan and Iraq, there were huge spaces of land which came under Tibetan Empire. So Tibetans were warriors. And then when Buddhism came to Tibet, we understood that there is no glory in killing people or occupying lands. And it takes more courage to understand your own state of mind. And if you want to conquer, conquer your greed. If you want to kill, kill your anger and hatred. And there lies the true lessons of ahimsa and karuna, which is the basis of all our existence. So these are the lessons of karuna and ahimsa that we have received from India. So
Right.
so you see, therefore, His Holiness the Dalai Lama again and again says that India is our guru and we are our chela. So therefore, when we are positioned on these basic philosophies, we should not have any second thought about this or look at
Right.
this as a weakness. Our weakness is that we are not able to find confidence or conviction in karuna and ahimsa. If we do, then we will see that the physical emanation of empire building in terms of financial power, in terms of military power, are false.
Right.
China may have built a huge economic infrastructure today, or they may be hugely powerful, but neither are the Chinese people inside happy, nor is the world happy with China today. Then what is the point? What is the point? Ultimately in life, we want to live in peace and we want happiness and we want to share this happiness. And the power is there in happiness, not in the capacity to torture and hurt other people. That's monstrosity. And this is not the end of any kind of a civilization.
Right. And oh God, I had a question. I forgot. I had like two, three questions in mind about what you just said. Um, so one is obviously you did mention the cultural connect that Tibet has with India, and it's more of a civilizational connect because both our civilizations age centuries before. And I think even the youth of today popularly are aware after 1959 what happened in Tibet and how the entire community came to India. But for our viewers who are young and who may not be aware of the connect that we have, can you please tell us a little bit more?
Well, interestingly, although Buddhism was born in India, which is just south of the Himalayas, Buddhism came to Tibet only after 1,100 years. Buddhism went to Sri Lanka first. It went to China. It went to Burma and Thailand, and spread all across India. But today, if you see, um, you know, much of the written text, either direct speeches recorded uh, from Lord Buddha's teachings, or commentaries and scholarship done by Indian pundits. These are today, you can see the largest collection of that only in Tibetan language. And Tibetans have, in the past 1,005 to 600 years, Tibetans have, if we have done any development, it is our scholarship in Buddhism. It is in our practice of Buddhism, and Tibetans have hugely contributed in bringing better scholarship, clarity of thought, nuance, understanding, and so many schools of thought, uh, started to come about in Tibet, and we have contributed in the development and spreading, propagation, and survival of Buddhism today. India, which was the birth um, of Buddhism today, uh, we do not see live practice of that. Uh, Much of Tamil Nadu or Gujarat or Maharashtra, even Kerala, and much of North India, which were the main places where
Right.
Buddhism was in practice, today it is hardly there from that lineage, of course.
Right.
So you see, so what we have contributed to India, or how we have, how the Tibetans have become an extended civilization of India, it's mainly
Right.
because we have received Buddhism from India, and and that is the philosophy that has, I think, given Tibetans a new identity, a new definition of the Tibetan civilization. So
Right.
you see, so this is such a, a close link. It's like an umbilical cord between Tibet and India. And when we say Tibet, we are also talking about the Tibetan religion and culture and language and people, even in all across the Himalayas. The recently, when I finished 4 months of traveling all across the Himalayas, I saw extension of Tibetan religion and culture in the Himalayas, and this is the same thing that we have received from India.
Right.
So that kind of a relationship is what we are talking about.
Right. Now, His Holiness the Dalai Lama also is getting old, and that's a matter of concern for us. And we've seen the Panchen Lama issue coming up time and again. No, China has its own plans, but do you think they'll be effective in appointing their own and then sort of creating a fake legitimacy in Tibet?
Well, what China does really doesn't matter in the case of reincarnation of His Holiness the Dalai Lama or His Holiness the Panchen Lama. Essentially, when it comes to Tibetan Buddhism, and especially the case of reincarnation, it's a very unique tradition, and it's practiced only in the Tibetan community. Believing that the Dalai Lama has come back into life for the 14th time, and China, being a capitalist country today, running a dictatorial regime in the name of communism, where is any space for faith in reincarnation?
Right.
So for China, the Dalai Lama's reincarnation is only a tool and in an attempt to rule over the Tibetans and trying to gain legitimacy with that. And even there, they are miserably failing. In the past, ever since 1995, they've been attempting to replace the Tibetan reincarnation of the Panchen Lama, and they installed a new boy. The boy became a victim, and the real Panchen Lama, the China, vanished him. So you see,
Right.
they are playing a politics in this, and it's a really a dirty politics in this,
Right.
where they themselves have no faith in Buddhism. They themselves have no idea about reincarnation, and for them, it is only a tool.
Right. You
While
did
for us,
mention that you're in. Sorry, please go ahead.
yeah, while for us, both His Holiness the Panchen Lama and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, or in that matter, all these reincarnate lamas, for us, these are our spiritual gurus. And
Right.
there has always been a very rich and long tradition of such guru shishya relationship in the
Parampara.
Tibetan
Right.
community, something that we have again learned and adapted from India.
Right.
And this will continue. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama uh, presently is the 14th one. His Holiness himself has said that I am healthy and fine, and why should China worry about the Dalai Lama's 15th reincarnation? So
Right.
you see, for China, it's only a tool and an attempt to rule over Tibet, and there is there's no business for China to come into this. It is purely Tibetan tradition of reincarnations.
We definitely pray for a very long life for the holiness, for His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and I think you mentioned in one of the interviews that you are in touch with some of your relatives and family who are left behind in Tibet. What is the sentiment today? What has changed in the last 30, 40 years?
Silence, silence. I think one of the things that that has come to define the present situation inside Tibet is silence. Although we understand that there is an unsaid, undeclared resistance, and that too in the form of cultural resistance, there is much stronger form of resistance in Tibet than the political actions like coming into the street and raising your fist and demanding freedom for Tibet, independence of Tibet, or in the form of self-immolations that we have been seeing since 2009, 2010 onwards. So you see, in all these cases, um, what we see in Tibet is on the outside that there is a great drama, that the Chinese government makes Tibetans do all sorts of things, raising the Chinese five-star red flag, or pretending to be in a huge congregation and where they all nod their heads to all the propaganda
Yeah.
preachings that the Chinese local Chinese Communist Party do, and they know that they cannot trust the Tibetans. They know that the
Right.
Tibetans are there only in numbers, and they don't trust them. So that the one of the reasons very clear is
Mm.
Chinese officials and military officers, they do not walk alone in Tibetan neighborhoods
Right.
because they fear that they may be knifed or mugged or beaten or even killed in the Tibetan community. They
Right.
know they do not trust, but there is a great show and the kind of a drama.
Yeah.
So they make these kind of congregations, and then they would try to highlight that it gives the media people within China a sense of satisfaction that they've done something like that. But it works on the Chinese people in mainland China,
Right.
where in China they think, and it is the narrative has been created within China that Tibetans have been what is called called liberated from the old what is called the feudal society,
Right.
from the Dalai Lama rule, and this propaganda keeps on going to the Chinese people that all the people of the occupied countries are happy with the Chinese rule.
Right.
And they themselves know that when they as Chinese are not happy under Xi Jinping's dictatorial regime, how would any occupied people of the occupied countries like Tibet and East Turkestan and Mongolia be ever happy under the Xi Jinping's dictatorial regime? So they all know, but there is a you know unsaid drama that is going around, and which has then become the uh, superficial narrative on the outside, and this is
Yeah.
what they try to dish out to the rest of the world.
Well, they try, even in the case of India, when we had the clash at Galwan Valley, they try with that propaganda, but I'm sorry to say they're miserably bad. At least they should try something better, which is probably a little more convincing. But I'm very curious about when you began with your activism because you've gotten into a lot of trouble. Because I think in during our college days, it was because of activists like you that we looked up to, is why even we became anti-establishment, so to speak, right? And this sense of coming out on the streets and protesting for justice is what is inspired. And I think it's also become a part of the pop culture in India, where Tibetan independence movement has become an independence movement for Indians as well. Well, like it's a part of our cultural identity as well today. So when was the first time that you can recall this started? And why are you not afraid? I mean, being jailed by the Chinese is a different thing, but even it's come to an extent where Indians are also saying, "Arey yaar, bas karo, please let the Chinese at least come for a visit."
True. um, my most recent jail experience in India was 2019. That was the time when Xi Jinping and Narendra Modi ji had coconut drink
Yeah,
at Mahabalipuram in
yeah,
Tamil Nadu. And at the time when I got arrested, I was sent to Chennai Central Jail, Pural Jail. I was telling the inspector there, Srinivasan, and I said to him that I am not the enemy. The enemy is China. You should jail Xi Jinping. You should put Xi Jinping in jail, not me. At the time I said, and he was just laughing it off. I said, I was okay, 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 that kind of thing. And after the Galwan Valley massacre,
Yeah,
after when we lost like 20 soldiers and almost about 100 Indian soldiers were wounded in this, I
yeah,
called Srinivasan again, the the
yeah,
inspector. I said to him, I told you 1 year ago that the enemy is not between Tibetans and Indians. The enemy is
right,
China. When China comes in, then you have to go out and arrest us and you have to jail us.
right,
The real enemy is China, and even behind Pakistan there is Chinese hand. So you see, when China comes in between, either between India and Nepal, or China comes between India and Sri Lanka, or
right,
China comes between India and Pakistan, or India and Bangladesh, or Burma, wherever, China always creates trouble.
right.
So in this kind of activism, I've been to jail like 16
16
times.
times, right? Yeah,
No, yeah, 1 6. I've been to jail. But for me, these are it's a part of the Tibetan freedom movement. I'm very proud having gone to jail, and these
right.
jail experiences really liberated me, freed me from all the personal constraints and desire for
But
more
I'm
comforts
genuinely
and
very
self-understanding.
interested about the interaction that you have with the Indian police because even they know that you're not the enemy here, but
Yes.
they're also under instructions
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
so from
Yeah.
the government. So, how
Mm.
is your interaction with these people? Like, do you
Oh,
stay in
my
touch?
my interactions with the Indian police and or even intelligence officers, it's this is very dramatic here. We when I go out to protest, either in front of the Chinese embassy
Yeah,
or in front of hotels where Chinese prime ministers, presidents, are, were going, I. I've done this protest all over India, whether it's Chennai or Bangalore,
yeah,
Goa, Ahmedabad, Delhi, and so many different places. Um, and every time, the Indian either intelligence officers or police, they're always after me and try to get me even before the Chinese visitors come to India.
right,
And I always get away, um, without getting arrested. I'm able to do a protest, and
right.
sometimes they are more organized and clever, so I get arrested even before I do any kind of antic. So you see, there is a cat and mouse kind of a game, Tom and Jerry का game जैसा है. But once I am arrested, once I'm inside, then we
Yeah,
sit down and have chai and we talk about, our own, arrange our sense of organizing and how we, study, follow each other. These are some of the biggest and most warm, cordial conversations with police officers. And even today, I'm friends with many of them. Even today, I send them Diwali greetings, and they send me New Year greetings
right.
also. So we are friends like this, and they tell me again and again that you are doing something what Bhagat Singh and Subhash Chandra Bose did when India
Absolutely.
was leading its freedom movement from the Britishers.
Right. Absolutely. They're definitely not wrong about it. So you have been also leading this campaign called Boycott China, and I think India awakens now and then, especially when we have incursions at our eastern sector or the northern sector borders with China. Uh, for that matter, but this is coming from an Indian perspective, but from a Tibetan perspective, why do you think this is very important that the world actually follows this?
See, very often, China apologists, people who think that we are still dependent on China, we still have to talk to them. People keep on saying that it is the people of China who are getting affected, and I say this, and it is important to know that finally people of China must be affected. Unless they are affected, they will not change, and they will not move. And unless the people of China move, no change is going to happen in China. So
Right,
the real target is people of China. We need to inspire them. We need to move them, and also the effect of the Chinese propaganda. This is something we must really disturb. and China is able to effectively rule over them by two methods. One one is um, the language barrier. China has created Chinese language as a tool to divide Chinese and rest of the world. And because much of the rest of the world do not speak Chinese or read Chinese,
Right.
and people
Correct.
in China do not speak any other language other than the Chinese language. So the language has become a divide between these two. Now,
Right.
the Chinese who are in overseas or in foreign countries, like, for example, Hong Kong or Taiwan or Singapore or Malaysia, many other
Yeah.
countries and free independent countries where Chinese language is spoken, many of them do not concern about the questioning China's dictatorial regime. They do not care about it. Yeah. So, and then also overseas Chinese, they are scared of questioning the wrongdoings of the Chinese Communist Party. Um, so this is how China remains unquestioned and
Right.
undeterred in maintaining their kind of a rule. This is one is the language barrier, and second is the very highly sophisticated technological divide. China has created the internal China world and external world outside China. So whether it's by use of tech, internet, apps. Um, so there is the world inside China where whatever they say do not go out, and
Right.
whatever being discussed or using any kind of tech on the outside do not go into China. So you see,
Right.
China has effectively divided the world within China and outside, and that's where the international community is failing in in sharing with the Chinese people
Right.
their idea of democracy, their idea of free speech, their idea of questioning their government, their idea of making your own government by people's power, something that internationally all the countries value so much.
Right.
People's power, democracy. Um, so that this is how Xi Jinping is able to
Yeah.
make himself the dictator forever.
Right.
And there is and although there have been many protest rallies in China, police cars toppled, rock fights between police and people, these are hardly reported outside, and
Right.
many of the media, um, being sponsored by Chinese advertisement, they
Yeah.
do not carry these kind of reports. So people in the world are uninformed or completely ignorant, because these kind of reports of dissent and protests within China are not reported, like organ harvesting that you were earlier talking about. So you see,
Right.
we see that this is how China has been maintaining its divide and its repressive regime within China and outside. So you see, this is how China maintains its rule, and they would constantly portray to the rest of the world, either governments or corporate companies, and keep them reminding that your interest is in maintaining a cordial relationship with the government of China.
Right.
And they would threaten, and sometimes they would weaponize this kind of a diplomatic or trade or relationship in terms of sports,
Yeah.
uh, to either discipline or sometimes even punish Western countries
Right.
in because if they question China's policies, they would punish them, and this would then become a kind of an example for the rest of the world.
Right. I mean, you're talking about the Chinese diaspora and the citizenry itself, but even the world is not putting a lot of courage in questioning the origins of the pandemic, for that matter. We've all been through a horrible pandemic in the last 2 years. And I
Yes,
don't think, even the world governments have been doing enough to strongly
yes,
investigate and question China if there is a theory that originates from the labs.
yeah,
Uh, I've taken away a lot of your time, but one last thing is you're also a poet and a writer, and you're somebody who's extremely motivated, moved, and inspired by what you stand for and what the movement stands for. As a request from our viewers, can you please read us some from your books?
Yeah. So for me, writing poetry is such an important intellectual, spiritual, and physical exercise, because this helps me in exploring unseen, unimagined world. Writing poetry helps me to go to those parts of myself or my subconscious world which are either not here or have never been explored. And in my writing, I'm able to go to those places and create such a new world. So poetry for me is so very important, in giving myself a new direction, and a sense of creativity, inspiring to look at things differently. Um, of course, there are some poems that I've written, uh, things about identity, about culture. One of the things that I can immediately say now, recite
Sure.
now, is a poem about a journey, about traveling, because we keep on looking at certain destination as a horizon at the end of the world. And from there, once you get there, then you realize that there is much more world to cover than what little you have seen. And in this, I have this poem called Horizon, which goes like this. It says, from home you have reached the horizon here, from here to another, here you go, from there to the next, next to the next, horizon to horizon, every step is a horizon. Count the steps and keep the number. Pick the white pebbles and funny strange leaves. Mark the curves and cliffs around, for you may need to come home again. So you see, for me, this journey is so very important, and
Right.
the journey makes the man. The journey, uh, whether it's a physical journey or spiritual journey, or it's a speaking tour, like what I did in the Himalayas recently, from
Right.
Ladakh to Arunachal. You keep on learning, and the learning keeps changing you, and slowly you realize that what kind of changes you are seeing within yourself, and how many of these stereotypes, myths have been busted, and you become wiser, you understand mechanisms of myth building. It's such an interesting and humanizing effects, as a human being. Traveling is such a real education, and because I'm myself such a traveler, I encourage other people to travel and learn the new world, and especially um, our Indian brothers and sisters, because there's so much of stereotypes between the South Indians and the North Indians, and
Yeah.
also the Northeast Indians.
Yeah.
And for much of Indian population, people of my face, we are all chinkies.
Yes.
So you see, we have a lot of traveling to do within our own
Right.
country. Go beyond borders and learn about new languages and cultures and peoples and food and clothing and customs. You will see
Right.
that India is much, much richer and more beautiful than you have ever imagined. And you will
Right.
love India more if you travel.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you. You are an inspiration, and please continue to do the amazing work that you're doing.
Okay, thank you, और बहुत बहुत नमस्ते, सबको
Thank
बहुत
you
बहुत
so much.
नमस्ते.
Namaste, and I hope you can join us for a conversation in the future too.
जरूर प्लीज, जरूर बुलाइए, मैं जरूर आऊंगा, और हम फिर से दूसरा बातचीत वार्तालाप
Hanji.
करेंगे.
And I'll take
Thank you
up your
so much.
advice seriously. And if my company permits, I will take a vacation and I'll come see you in Dharamshala. So,
You don't need an excuse of a vacation. You just go out and travel, and you keep learning. Yes.
right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you.
Namaste. We hope you enjoyed this Chitti Media content. Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.